same time, we have this fascination with the black masculine body. Why else would you pose LeBron James that way? Why else is Rick Ross taking his shirt off? We'll talk about that as well. Okay, very good, very good. So one of the things that I want to do is talk a little bit about comic books. This is Thomas Inge, 1990, I believe, and he's talking about how great comic books are and how powerful they are, so on and so forth. Generations, it stimulates to the imagination that mere words on the printed page, blah, 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 so on and so forth. So great! Beyond the oral tradition, insofar as these figures embody the traditions of Western culture, it's introduced generations of readers to symbolic ways of addressing the continuing problems of society, blah, 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 blah. I mean, look at that language. It's really, really powerful language. Well, but it depends. Because if you were a young black person in the early 1900s, 1941, and you were looking for an image, a representation of yourself in comic books, you would see a character named Whitewash, who was part of the Young Allies. Whitewash. There's your boy. He's over there. If you can't see him, just look for the lips. And the nose, yeah. There you go.
He's got a zoot suit.
He has a zoot suit, indeed. There's Whitewash. So, which tensions are being resolved here? I mean, I can imagine, for my father's generation, this being a source of tension instead of something that relieves tension. And I think the quote from Inge represents a sort of whitewashed, excuse the pun, myopia about the way in which comic books can be both a resolution of tension and a source of tension for the reader. And now, so if we're thinking about comic books, this is my man Luke Cage, my favorite comic book superhero growing up. And again, I told you that I was taught to be critical. My parents wouldn't let my sister, we couldn't watch Tarzan on Saturdays. We couldn't watch The Little Rascals. So we'd go out and play afterwards, and all of my friends would be talking about what Tarzan did, and I would have to lie, because I had no idea. And I'll never forget, one of my friends, Jimmy, said, "You don't even know what happened, did you?" It was embarrassing. But it wasn't until I became adult that I began to understand. So I loved Luke Cage growing up, but as an adult looking back on these images, look at these images. These are not liberating images. These are images of restraint. These are images of control. Luke Cage, bound, chained. Bound, chained. His enemies are like, their names are like Mr. Fish and Spear, Cockroach. Bound. 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 All right? And so my affection for Luke Cage, he's like a cousin. There's some cousins, you don't like what your cousin became, you know what I mean? But he's still your cousin. I still love Luke Cage, but I don't like Luke Cage. And one of the things, just as a quick indication of how, when Jeffrey Brown talks about this overabundance in comic books, Luke Cage is a superhero, but this overabundance is mitigated. The threat is mitigated in a number of different ways. One, we can look at his outfit, okay? He has chains for a waist. He wears chains around his wrist essentially. There's some people that he has a tiara, and there's a point, and it's pointed down. So I've gone to some of these comic book conventions like, yeah, that tiara is pointed down. You know what that means, right? This kind of thing. But there are some other problems with Luke Cage as well. And one of the problems is best encapsulated by one of my favorite Luke Cage storylines. So Luke Cage is a hero of Harlem, a hero in Harlem, okay? And he's minding his business in Harlem one day. I'm going to skip forward a little bit. And some white guy shows up in Harlem, because that never happens in the 1970s. And the white guy hires Luke Cage to find some people. Luke Cage, his original title was Luke Cage, Hero for Hire. How much does it cost to hire Superman? We don't know. Luke Cage will go out for $200, you know. Hero for hire, Luke Cage. So this guy offers him $200, and Luke Cage says, did you say $200? Yes, $200 to find some guys. Remember, it's comic book. So he goes out and he fights these guys, and it turns out that they're these robots, these sentient robots. And Luke Cage ends up hurting them, and he's frustrated. And he goes to confront the guy that hired him about, hey, what's going on? And he's about to beat the guy up. Now look at the language. Can you see the language? Your troopers wait. But they ain't nothing to Luke Cage, not when I got blood in my eye, and a man who can tell me why is in front of me. Move your mouth, or I'll move your I mean, it's just that kind of language. And it gets worse. So he's about to beat this guy up, and Dr. Doom says, hey, don't touch him. I'm Dr. Doom. Now, back in the day, Dr. Doom was number one in terms of villains in Marvel Comics. All right? Look, first of all, Luke Cage has no idea who Dr. Doom is, first of all, because he's a hero of Harlem. Okay? Superman and these guys are out fighting, as Bill Foster says in the documentary, trying to save the universe. Luke Cage is fighting pimps and drug dealers. All right? So Luke Cage says, look, what, Dr. Doom? You know, what kind of name is that? And Dr. Doom says, listen, I'm still paying you. I still need you to work. Say, I don't dig it, but you got a right to hire me like anyone else. So Luke Cage goes, and he eventually finds these robots again, and he fights them. And he ends up, I skipped ahead with the part where he fights the Fantastic Four. He fights the robots, he's really upset about it, and he goes to get his money, and the guy says, well, Dr. Doom left, and he doesn't pay people when he doesn't have to. And of course, Luke Cage is always tearing his shirt off. So what does Luke Cage do, friends? He breaks into the Baxter Building where the Fantastic Four lives to steal a rocket from the Fantastic Four. That was my guy, Luke Cage. You understand? So he fights the Fantastic Four to a standstill. He really does. And Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic says, okay, look, I'll give you a rocket to fly. All you have to do is just get in the rocket and fly over there to Latveria. So Luke Cage flies to Latveria. What happens is Luke Cage ends up in the middle of what is essentially a robot insurrection. Dr. Doom is oppressing these robots, and he tells Luke Cage that some of the robots escaped to Harlem, and they disguise themselves as blacks because there are no blacks in Latveria, and he needed to hire a black to find them. So Luke Cage flies to Latveria and finds himself in the middle of this robot insurrection, but he's not at all interested in the politics of the insurrection. So he finds Dr. Doom, and Dr. Doom says, wait a minute. Now, this is one of the best lines in the history of comic book. He says, look, when they told me that some black guy had landed in Latveria in the Fantastic Four's craft, I knew it had to be you. And Dr. Doom was like, I thought it was like, Dr. Doom was saying, I thought it was the Fantastic Four coming to challenge me or whatever for justice and bring me. And he's like, it's Luke Cage. And what does Luke Cage say? Where's my money, honey? And Dr. Doom says, look, you came all the way over here for $200? You are crazy. And so Dr. Doom's frustrated. Luke Cage is wasting his time. They get into a fight. Luke Cage beats Dr. Doom. Because somehow Luke Cage figured out that what you have to do is you have to punch Dr. Doom in the chest. No one else had figured that out yet, I guess. So he defeats Dr. Doom, and then this mysterious Martian character emerges, and he's about to kill Dr. Doom, and Luke Cage prevents him from doing so. And Dr. Doom expresses his gratitude. This is the second time that Dr. Doom has placed his hand on Luke Cage's shoulder, in case you didn't notice. And he says, oh, thank you so much. And Luke Cage said, look, if he had killed you, I couldn't have gotten my money. So can I please just get my money? He gets into the money. He gets the money. He gets back into the Fantastic Four's craft, flies back to the United States, and Dr. Doom ends up defeating the insurrection. Ben Grimm, the Thing, confronts Luke Cage, and Luke Cage says, look, just read it in the paper the next day. And the last panel of this, I think it's a 2-issue arc, is Dr. Doom defeats the robot insurrection. So what do we learn about Luke Cage? What do we learn about his power? Well, how is his power undermined? He's a hero for hire. He lives in Harlem, and he fights people like Cockroach, Big Mariah, Spear, Mr. Fish. When he leaves Harlem and it goes all the way to Latveria, it's for $200. So the threat that he represents in terms of, the kind of hierarchy that we see in popular culture where white men at the top, that threat is completely mitigated. So you don't need to worry about Luke Cage. Another thing that we see is the way in which Harlem is depicted. And Luke Cage is inextricably bound to Harlem. Look at this language in describing Harlem. New York, an animal, and live off it like tapeworms, slow-eyed boys looking for fast money, the night walkers, Someone from Harlem did not write this, by the way, And I had the good fortune of interviewing some writers, and many of them were sincere about their efforts to sort of increase the diversity, but they're not drawing from any kind of direct experience. Okay, very good. Right. So now what I want to talk about is how many of you have read W.E.B. Du Bois's essay of Booker T. Washington and Others? It's a great essay. So when Luke Cage goes all the way to Latveria and confronts Dr. Doom for $200, I'm reminded of the criticism that Du Bois offers of Booker T. Washington when he says that Booker T. Washington should have been more critical. The language is broad and discriminating criticism of the white South during his Atlanta exposition address. But instead, people said it was the Atlanta Compromise, and Du Bois says that the white Southerners felt, hey, if that's all you are asking, then take it. And Dr. Doom there's this moment where Luke Cage can really have this impact. And he said, oh, $200, take it, get out of my face. Okay. So that's the early 70s. And then we can talk about comic books some more here. Let's take a look. I'm scared to switch out because then let's talk about a few other comic book characters. Deathlock, Cyborg, and there's a new character coming out in DC called Hammerdown. These are all African-American superheroes. Deathlock and Cyborg are men as machines. Tony Stark is Iron Man. He's man in machine. Deathlock and Cyborg are men as machines. They are machines. Hammerdown is another character similar to Luke Cage. Luke Cage's superpowers that he has, bulletproof skin. Hammerdown's skin is essentially steel-plated. So we see this recurring theme of black men being impervious to harm, of them being insensate. John Jennings, Sunny Buffalo talks about the idea of black men being insensate, not being able to feel. And this, again, speaks to that kind of overabundance, the idea of black masculine power. Okay, very good. Now, Stanford Carpenter, who is an anthropologist as well, the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, reminds us that comic books are influenced by market forces. So what we see in comic books is the same as, in terms of broader popular culture. It's the result of editors and their editors deciding what will be most palatable to the marketplace. And what is most palatable to the marketplace does not disrupt traditional ideas of power and hierarchy. This is one of the reasons why they made a Green Lantern movie with the white Green Lantern instead of Jon Stewart. Despite the fact that the Justice League cartoon series featured Jon Stewart and was immensely successful. Okay, some people are nodding their head, and some of you all are still mad about that. Okay. Anybody remember Different Strokes? And Webster? What's going on? Different Strokes ran for, I think, like 8 years, 7 years. Webster ran for 5 years. Again, in this moment where you have, in the United States, tensions around affirmative action, there's tensions around race, all of a sudden these shows that feature these little tiny black men are very, very popular. Very popular, okay? And we're not talking about, they aren't cute babies. They are little, just tiny black men, all right? And I think we could also think about that in relation to the idea of souvenirs, pulling from, when I mentioned pulling from the black masculine body that had been castrated, pulling from the black masculine body that had been lynched, instead of the physical bodily souvenirs. Now we're talking about souvenirs in popular culture, representational souvenirs. Okay, I want to show a couple of video clips here. So we're going to make this work because everyone was very patient with me. And now I'm trying to do screen black. And it's not going to screen black. Okay. let's see here. Now I want to go to QuickTime. So I had all of these embedded in my first PowerPoint slide, but that's okay. We're going to make it work. What do I want to share with you first? Oh, yes. I lost this one when my external hard drive crashed. Really quickly, Bloodsport, 1988, Jean-Claude Van Damme. Action movies are really great to analyze this kind of dynamic. So Bloodsport, Jean-Claude Van Damme, is about this alleged underground kumite open fist martial art tournament. And the opening scene features all of these fighters training in their home country. And then there's a scene where they cut to this black guy who jumps in a tree and chops open a coconut. Anyone know what kind of martial art that is? I don't know. Oh, okay, all right, maybe you know. Okay, here we go. So let's take a look at, let's see, yeah, I think so, yeah. This is Demolition Man. No, that's not what I want. Okay. Wesley Snipes and Sylvester Stallone, the ageless Sylvester Stallone. All right, so let's just stop there. Another one, really, dinner table conversation. Let's see, QuickTime again. I always lose my mouse. There it is. Let's look at, this is Universal Soldier: The Return. You have to suffer through a lot of really bad movies to do this kind of work. Let's see, I lost it. Universal Soldier: The Return. Okay, it's just hard to see my mouse. There we go. So I want us to, let me drag it over a bit. I want us to remember that opening clip with Gus. Remember Gus? And just look at this. This is 1999. Is it too bright in here? Can we turn on some lights? I want your daddy too. Okay, so really quickly. Okay, yeah, that's Jean-Claude Van Damme coming to save his daughter. Okay, and here's the scene. There we go.
That doesn't work. You've tried that already. You're right.
Wait for it. All right, so okay, very good. Dinner table conversation. So it's very okay. First of all, yeah, I mean it is what it is. There's some similarities between those two films. Universal Soldier: The Return. Michael J. White plays Seth, which is essentially a computer program that took bodily form. All right, when he finds out, the computer program finds out that the project is going to be shut down, and so he becomes a human being. Of course, he becomes a black man, and he actually kidnaps Jean-Claude Van Damme's daughter. And this is a problem. I mean, this very much is evocative of the whole idea of Gus and so on and so forth. And so when we saw earlier the quote about the lynchings and the way in which the fetish is going to be played and replayed again and again and again, we see that in popular culture. I'm a big zombie nerd. I can't believe it's quarter till already. I'm All right, one more clip, and then I'm going to close here. Appreciate your patience. Why does my mouse keep disappearing? There it is. Okay. All right. 28 days later, anyone? All right.
Lastly, meet Mela. Mela? Here. Here. Mela. Got infected 2 days ago. Mitchell managed to knock her out and got a chain around his neck. Giving her an egg. The idea was to birth infection. And a teacher. In a way. He's telling me he'll never bake bread. Farm crop. Raise livestock. He's telling me he's futureless.
He's futureless.
And eventually he'll tell me how long the infected take to start again.
So, you know, I had intentions on talking about Hancock. Maybe we can talk about some of that during the Q&A. But we see these recurring kinds of images and representations and narratives in popular culture where we recognize the power of the black masculine body as this threat, but we have to mitigate the threat. We have to mitigate the threat. And 28 days later, Mailer's threat, the infected black man there, is mitigated. First, he's leashed like a dog in the backyard, and later, the protagonist uses Mailer against the soldiers that have less than noble intentions with the survivors that they encounter. So what's next? I think, for me, it's important two things are important. One, I mentioned earlier the idea of making yourself a fetish. And so I see that in a lot of the kind of muscular performative hip-hop that we see. That this idea, there's certain ideas of black masculinity that have been established, like a script has been written, but it's not the script that you have written for yourself, it's a script that has been written for you. Now, there's a certain extent where you don't know how to write your own script. You're simply performing someone else's script. The other piece is this, and I use this poem a lot and when I teach my undergraduate and graduate black masculinity class. It's a poem by Pat Parker. And it's called this is a poem. I don't want to hear about how my real enemy is the system. I'm no genius, but I do know that the system you hit me with is called a fist. So the other piece that I'm pursuing is the way in which black men also participate in reifying this kind of imagery and these kinds of performances. Also, participating in the oppression of other groups, including, of course, black women, as they aspire to these traditional notions of masculinity that don't serve black men and don't serve the black community. Anyway, I think I'm out of time now. Okay. Thank you all so much for your patience, and I look forward to some Q&A. But first, I'd like to point out some important people. It's a joke. It's a tough crowd. A lot of my faculty here. Dr. Greenbaum is here. Dr. Wyford is here. Dr. Bird is here. Barbara Zelag is here. Dr. Rodriguez is here. She was on my dissertation committee. Dr. Hilma Green. I know I'm going to miss some people, but I love you all. Hey! I love you all. It's good to be back.